Can you read to me the nameplate?
Judge Eboni K Williams.
So the only thing that matters in this particular courtroom is how I see it. I am from North Carolina by way of Louisiana with some West Coast cool and a New York edge. Do we have a problem, ma'am?
No, I don't, Your Honor.
Equal justice is all about the most important values of our country: freedom, integrity, and those are the things that I'm striving for. Ma'am, you run your household, this man gets to run his. I decided to become an attorney and pursue the law. I wanted to be a voice for the voiceless. This court cannot hold this woman accountable. People from all sectors of life, black, white, purple, gay, straight, queer, and that's what equal justice with Judge Eboni K Williams is all about.
Derek Goodwin claims his property was dumped on the curb when his landlord mistakenly evicted him. Julia Hadley says the eviction was an error, but Mr. Goodwin wasn't on the lease, so she's not responsible for his stuff.
Good day. I see I've got Derek Goodwin here as my plaintiff, Julia Hadley as my defendant. Mr. Goodwin, you are suing Ms. Hadley here for $20,000. You're saying that this was a landlord of yours at some time and that she evicted you erroneously. Tell me a little bit more about why you're suing her today.
Yeah, as you said, Your Honor, I was mistakenly evicted. They meant to be evicting the unit next door. We were fully paid up on rent. We had actually never missed a rent payment. And we came home, my daughter and I, to find that many of our belongings were strewn out on the curb. Some of them had been thrown in the dumpster. When we went into the unit, all of our stuff was gone. In particular, a TV that I had recently purchased and a sectional. That's the bulk of the financial damages, but also some of my daughter's toys and belongings, like her teddy bear, which was beloved to her, we found ripped in half on the street, which was obviously quite traumatic for her. She's only 5 years old. When I gave the defendant the opportunity to reimburse us for the damages, she made no effort to deal in good faith. She told me, submit this rental application, and I did, and then she was like, well, you've actually been denied, so there's nothing I can do. And at no point before we got here did she really make any effort to help us as we move into a new place, and we're trying to furnish it with stuff up to the level of what we had before.
So you're telling me, Mr. Goodwin, you and your daughter lived in this unit for how long?
Well, originally it was my then girlfriend and daughter's place, and they moved in 2020, and then after about 6 months, I moved in with them, and we were making a go of it.
Yep.
And then when we broke up, and my ex wanted to move out, my daughter was already in school, and we didn't want to uproot her, so I stayed on, and we lived there for another year.
Okay.
Again, I was making all the rent payments. They were in my name, and we never had any issues. And then we came home one day to just find all of our belongings had been, taken out of our place and thrown on the ground or stuffed into a trash. And some of them we don't even know what happened to. Like the TV, it's not clear where it went.
All right, sir. What do you have to show some evidence around some of this to the court? Do you have receipts? Do you have pictures of your goods? Do you have checks that you paid rent with? What do you have, sir? Give everything you have to my bailiff, please, sir.
Okay.
Yep, just give
Just an entire folder?
Yes, sir. Thank you. Because this is, that's a lot of claim there. Let me try to take a look, see if I can figure out what's going on here. Thank you, sir. Okay, I do see a standard lease agreement. This is the girlfriend I see, Anna Smith?
Yeah.
Okay, so she is named in the lease, and only she is named in the lease. You do know that, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I do see the landlord, Ms. Hadley, here as the landlord. Let's see abandonment. Tenant vacates or abandons, but you're saying, so you never moved out?
No.
Okay, let's take a look at this, because you would be considered a guest, I suppose, since you were not on the lease. There should be no other persons living in the premises other than the tenants, and any occupants are allowed for periods not lasting more than 14 days unless otherwise approved by the landlord. So we'll get to that in a second. Now, it looks like the rent was $2,500 a month, sir, that you were paying?
Yes, but if you look at the lease, it has a mistake there and says the wrong number.
Okay, yes, because I see the lease has $1,500 a month.
Yeah, but you can see my bank statement. I was paying $2,500 a month.
So how did you know you were supposed to be paying $2,500?
Everything was verbally communicated to me by my girlfriend.
By the girlfriend.
That's why I was never added to the lease, because
Okay.
I didn't see it until much later. But I started paying the $2,500 a month, and we didn't get any communication that we were paying, too much. So I had no reason to think it was wrong.
Okay, so this is a home furnishing estimate, sir, that you're offering the court? You're
Yeah.
saying this is the equivalency of the valuation of everything that you lost?
Yes.
Okay, I see a lot here. I see luxury bedroom, bathroom, home office, master bedroom, guest bedroom, all this stuff. This is really saying that this could be up to $20,000. That's where you're getting this from, sir?
Yeah, and then there's also a receipt in there for the purchase of some of the items that were damaged, just so you know that, why the price tag is what it is.
I do see that. Okay, I also see, sir, that you were given a letter of denial once you actually did apply for the apartment lease. It says low credit.
Yes, my credit score was a few points below what they required. I was only applying because she said that was what was necessary in order to process reimbursing me. We had already decided by that point we didn't want to live in a place where we might mistakenly be evicted.
Coming up on Equal Justice.
How can I take his word for that? I don't know that he was actually living there. I don't know if that's actually his stuff. Just because you were paying the rent, that doesn't mean that you weren't staying there. You could just be paying your girlfriend's rent.
If you'll be in the Los Angeles area and want to bring your case to court, call 1-888-552-6878. This is Equal Justice. Equal Justice is back with a case of Derek Goodwin, who blames Julia Hadley for wrongfully throwing out his property.
Okay, this sounds like a real mess, Miss Hadley. Tell me why you evicted this man and all of his things.
Your Honor, I never evicted him. If he's not on a lease, he cannot be evicted. How is that possible? My property management team did make a mistake once they removed all of his belongings out of that unit. But once we found out that there was the wrong unit, we did go and try to regain as many items as we could, and most of the stuff had already been taken. So I'm not responsible for it because he was never on that lease.
So you were trying to evict a different unit. That's
correct. In July of 2022, I had to execute an eviction notice on another unit right adjacent or next door to him.
And so you had gone through the proper court filings for that unit.
Correct. So my property team was executing that order.
Okay, but that was for the wrong unit, not this man's unit.
Correct.
Okay, did you subsequently execute that correct unit?
Yes, ma'am, we did evict that tenant.
Okay, so you put this man's belongings out, as you say, his daughter, teddy bear, all that stuff?
Unfortunately, Your Honor, we did make that mistake, but
Right.
I tried to correct my mistake and assist him in giving him 48 hours to fill out an application. I didn't charge him any type of application fee, but his credit score was low.
I understand that he didn't get a new apartment lease. I'm not concerned about that, to be quite frank, ma'am. What I'm concerned about are the things that he is saying that he lost. So, sir, let me ask you this. Were you able to recoup any of the items?
No, everything was either gone or had been damaged past the point
So
of
we
use.
did recover some items, and we did give those things to you.
She's talking about a handful of small items. I'm talking about the big ticket things like a couch.
Okay, so I see the TV was $2,500, and I see the dark gray sofa. You also paid $2,500, and then the rent. So let's talk about this discrepancy in the rent, Madam Hadley. So he's saying that he was paying $2,500. Were you receiving $2,500 a month for the rent on this unit?
I was receiving $25. At the end of her lease, she did go to a month-to-month, which causes the lease
to go up.
The increase.
Okay, so as I expected, sir, that wasn't you overpaying. It sounds like
Sure.
between the girlfriend and the landlord, they had a rent adjustment that you just weren't made aware of.
Your Honor,
And Your
I'm
Honor,
just
if I could
pointing
add-
out.
Wait a minute, Ms. Hadley. Go ahead, sir.
I'm just pointing out that her whole argument rests on a paperwork issue, saying that I didn't have my paperwork in a proper manner, and I'm pointing out that her lease is riddled with errors about the rent. It also says the governing laws of the agreement are Alabama, and as we all know, this took place in Texas. So I think it's hypocritical for her to say, well, you didn't have your name on this piece of paper, so I'm not going to make any good faith effort to reimburse you for my own people's mistake, which she admits readily, and say that she doesn't owe me anything because we didn't take care of this
Okay,
one.
Your Honor, even though he was paying the $2,500, that doesn't tell me that he was staying. He could have just been paying his girlfriend's rent. How can I take his word for that? I don't know that he was actually living there. I don't know if that's actually his stuff. Just because you were paying the rent, that doesn't mean that you weren't staying there. You could just be paying your girlfriend's rent.
You
It doesn't
knew
mean
that,
that you were staying there.
you knew that my daughter was living there, though.
Ms. Hadley, let me ask you this. What do you say about the plaintiff's argument that your document is less than perfect, so there should be some wiggle room here?
That document was drafted by my team. I wasn't aware that there were some mistakes in that, but there's still, Mr. Goodwin, it's his responsibility to come in and say, hey, I need to add my name to the list, especially if he's been living there a year. Wouldn't you think something would go wrong? How would I get in touch with you if there was a fire or something like that?
Well, let's talk about some things that could go wrong, Ms. Hadley. I'm glad you brought that up because he was living there, he says, for over a year with his daughter, and it sounds like the daughter was the consistent human that was occupying the space. She was in possession of her room for over 2 years.
Yes.
That's correct, right? Okay, Ms. Hadley, you did know the child was there since the inception of their lease, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so how often were you or your team, because we keep hearing about your team, checking on this unit, making sure it was in good condition, making sure that everything was, on the up and up in terms of the unit? Because that is something that landlords tend to do throughout a year-long period, correct?
Correct, Your Honor. We only go in if something is needed to be updated. If they call and ask for, have some repairs that need to be done,
Right.
then we'll do that. But as far as inspections or anything like that, we don't just go into their apartments without letting them know that we're going in.
So what you're telling the court, Ms. Hadley, is that for at least one calendar year, you nor your team stepped foot into this particular unit, and thus you really didn't know who was occupying the space.
That's correct.
Okay. Do you have any evidence for the court, ma'am? Do you have any lease or anything?
I only have the lease that he gave you. I think I have the same documents that he has.
Okay. Why don't you just offer that to the court? Let me make sure those documents match. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Okay, yep, I see the same denial of him for an extended lease because of the low credit score, so you did
I tried
run
to
that.
remedy the situation and help him to assist him
Well-
to live in the same area so his daughter continue going to the same school.
Okay, so but what you're saying at this point is he was originally erroneously evicted because it was the wrong unit, but at this point, he's actually evicted, right? Because you're saying that he's no longer permitted to be there.
Well, how can I evict someone who's not on a lease?
Coming up on Equal Justice.
You don't feel like you owe the plaintiff a dime because he wasn't on the lease? Is that your argument?
That is my argument on it. I did not know that he had even moved into the residence.
This is Equal Justice. Equal Justice is back with a case of Derek Goodwin, who blames Julia Hadley for wrongfully throwing out his property.
Sir, where are you living right now? Let me get it
I've
from
moved
you.
into a new apartment.
Okay, so you have a new apartment. You have a lease this time.
Yes, I have a lease.
Your name is on it.
My name is on it.
Okay,
Yes.
and you're paying your rent and everything's good.
Paying my rent, everything's good. I did have to furnish it with secondhand stuff from online because of the financial difficulties, which is part of why I'm seeking this.
Okay. And you're telling me, Ms. Hadley, that you don't feel like you owe the plaintiff a dime because he wasn't on the lease? Is that your argument?
That is my argument on it. I did not know that he had even moved into the residence.
Okay. I actually, believe it or not, think I've heard enough between the two of you to make my ruling. And, these landlord-tenant cases tend to be more complicated than people realize. And the reason is because people like to play armchair lawyer and feel like they understand the law in this space in a way that they don't. So oftentimes we hear things like, you're not on the lease, so you have no rights. And the reality is that's just not true in this nation. There's been a lot of revision to landlord-tenant law to make sure that people that are in possession of property, have rights. Even when they don't pay their rent, even when they have had legal action taken against them. And sometimes, ma'am, even if they are not indeed on the lease, which is why before you could remove the items from the property that you legally did evict properly, you had to have that declaration from the court saying that that person had been legally evicted. Because had you touched even that person's things before that legal process took place, we'd be in court for that person's items as well.
Coming up on Equal Justice.
He was staying for a year. He's no longer a guest,
So how
ma'am.
am I supposed to know that he's staying
Well,
there for a year?
that's the thing, Ms. Hadley. And I'm giving my ruling. This is not a time for Q&A.
This is Equal Justice. Equal Justice is back with a case of Derek Goodwin, who blames Julia Hadley for wrongfully throwing out his property.
Having your name on a lease is a very good thing. It goes by way of affirming legal possession in a very formalized way. But people can be in possession, ma'am, and people often are in possession of property and spaces absent a lease. People do it every day. Now, I want to talk about this guest clause because you rely heavily on it. You're saying that I don't have any obligation to this man, Your Honor, because he was a guest, he extended the 14 days, blah, 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 blah. Well, that's it exactly, Ms. Hadley. Once he was staying for a year, he's no longer a guest,
So
ma'am.
how am I supposed to know that he's staying there for a year?
Well, that's the thing, Ms. Hadley. And I'm giving my ruling. This is not a time for Q&A. The issue is you are supposed to know more than anybody. So the fact that he actually was paying you $2,500 a month, you're getting off pretty good. Okay, and you were cashing those rent checks. So you were getting paid, your property was being occupied by somebody other than the actual leasee, but the court is not going to penalize this man for that. He had possession, and there was a consistent possessor of the property throughout the lease term, which was the daughter, the minor child. And then you said what really controls here, ma'am, which is that you and your team made the biggest mistake of all, which is throwing out the wrong unit's item, okay? Your effort to remedy failed. Your effort to remedy, as this man told the court under sworn testimony, and even you admitted under your testimony, was a few items here and there, because ultimately when you went to confiscate the erroneously tossed items, most of them were gone. Which nice stuff is gone. You sit it on the curb for 5 seconds, it's going to be gone.
Judge Eboni's verdict when Equal Justice returns. This is Equal Justice.
Now, here's where it's not so good for you, Mr. Goodwin. You've asked the court to give you $20,000, which is a roundabout estimate for the cost of replenishing your entire apartment, because you were telling me that everything was thrown out. And I believe you. But the problem is you're not offering any evidence to everything. You're offering evidence for 2 items that I can physically see and really attest to their valuation. That's the only evidence I have in front of me, so this is the only thing I can rule on, sir. Mr. Goodwin, the court gives you its apologies. Being kicked out and evicted, especially after you've paid the rent, name on the lease, ma'am, or not, you were in legal possession. This court finds you were in legal physical possession. Possession is 9/10 of the law, ma'am. It is more controlling than 4 corners on a document. He was there, he paid your rent, he was a good tenant, but for y'all's mistake, you wouldn't even know he was there today. He'd still be there paying you $2,500 a month, and you'd still be accepting it. So this court is not persuaded. I rule in favor of the plaintiff, but only serve for $5,000. That is all the offering of proof you gave to this court. That is my ruling.
All rise.
Judge Eboni has ruled in favor of the plaintiff. The defendant is ordered to pay $5,000.
Any final thoughts for each other?
You're lucky I only had $5,000 worth of receipts. I'm sorry we have to waste everybody's time like this.
The time wasn't wasted, and I still don't owe you any money.
Okay, you've had your day in court. Please grab your belongings and follow me. Ladies first.
This has been a production of Allen Media Group.